We are back on MorningLine. Nick Beres along with legal analyst Nick Leonardo. Every time he comes on, I learn something from this guy. This guy can tell stories. And he's been around. It's great having you on. It's just good to be here. Good friend, and he's really knows the law, and I appreciate him coming on. The number up there, if you want to ask a question about some of these high-profile cases. Paul waited through the break. Let's go to Paul. Paul, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Nick, and good morning to you. Good morning to your buddy there.
Good morning.
I was more interested in the Joe Clyde Daniels case. The case out of Sumner County is definitely horrific, but the Joe Clyde Daniels case has really gripped me concerning that. I hope that justice prevails, and that's all I'll say, and I hope it will. But getting to the courtroom, Nick, Lord God, myself and my brother, I guess we was raised in a courtroom. I've testified numerous times for CCA and for the Tennessee Department of Corrections. I've also been a jury foreman. I went through, I can't remember exactly the legal term, of board dire or something where they select the jury. But I was selected out of that, and then I was elected to the jury foreman. It was a civil case in Williamson County, Tennessee. And just a quick thing about that case, the guy wanted $800,000 for damaging to his neck, and then when we got the case, with the judge give us the case, charged us, we went back, and there was half of them that wanted to give the $800,000, and the other half didn't want to give him a nickel. So we had to go through that. So my point is about a jury trial. You never know what a jury's going to do.
That's right.
Hey, let me ask you, Paul. I'm just curious. How did that verdict work out? What did you compromise? Did it end up being a hung jury? What did you guys do?
We almost hung it, but we did wind up compromising. I had to, Lord God, I don't really want to have to go through all that mess again, but we wind up giving the man $80,000.
80. So instead of 800, 80,000.
$80,000. And my final comment is this: is my brother was a defense attorney. He now is a public defender for Williamson County, Tennessee. But to let you know how crazy juries can be, my brother got a guy off one time in Perry County, Hohenwald, for shooting a cop in the back. Can you believe that? Got him off for shooting a cop in the back. So you never know what happens when the jury gets a case. Anyway, love your show. God bless both of you, and take care.
Thanks.
You never do.
Well, Paul raises an excellent point, and that is you never know what a jury is going to do.
Yeah.
You think that you do. And that's why it's so important. We have people out there that do nothing but specialize as a jury consultant. That they come up and they say, this is the kind of juror we think that you want, and this is why we think you want them. And so it's powerful, because who you get on that panel, it really dictates the outcome of the case. And in a case like Mr. Delkey's case, who's selected for a jury person, to be on that jury is so important, and it may not always go the way that you think. You may have this preconceived notion about certain demographics, certain employments, and they may think a certain way, and a lot of that's up in the air.
The Delkey case, again, the Metro police officer charged with shooting and killing a man, is going to be very interesting, because the demographic and it comes down to me how you may view as an individual a police officer.
That's exactly right.
We've talked about how different members of society may view law enforcement officers these days in a different light. And so what kind of jury are you going to have? The one question, and you've taught me this before, we talked about it, in a true system, as a juror, you're supposed to hear the evidence and decide what you believe. And yet, we hear all the time that jurors compromise. I understand that, so you don't have a hung jury. But in a perfect world, isn't it that, hey, if you've decided, especially if you're in a murder case, this guy didn't do it, and then there's others on the other side say this guy did do it, and then you, who believes truly he didn't do it, says, okay, well, we're not going to sentence him to death, but I guess I can agree to 20 years in prison, even though you believe he didn't do it, but you want to come with a compromise. Compromises happen all the time, but if you're compromising, you're not voting what you truly believe, are you?
Well, that's exactly right, and that's where the judge has a lot of power in this. Obviously, in a case, people go back and they start deliberating, and sometimes the majority of the time they take a vote immediately after they elect the foreperson to see where they are. And if the judge, lets them leave, or somehow they get the feeling that the judge might find this to be a hung jury after a day or two, then it's easier to stick to your guns. But if you're the trial judge and you have them, let's say it's a murder case like the Bobo case, you have them deliberating for 8 days, 9 days, and it's harder to stick to your guns the longer it goes, because these people are a lot of times away from their families, away from their jobs.
I understand why they compromise.
And you understand why they compromise, but they're not supposed to compromise, and that's why in voir dire, as Paul talked about, that when you question the jury and try to select them, you make a point to ask them, can you stick to your guns? Can you, if you find this person to be not guilty or think he's not guilty, can you stick to your guns in that deliberation?
Or will you decide, it's my daughter's birthday this weekend,
right.
I want to get home in a hurry, I'm just going to go along with whatever's easy. And if you don't think that happens with jurors, you're naive. It happens. I think a lot of jurors, most of them, mean very well and do the best they can, and I think we've got a good system. But compromise comes along, and a lot of those folks, they just want to go home.
Well, you never know.
Especially if they're sequestered.
You never know. I mean, sometimes these jurors, they look at things that maybe that aren't in evidence. Okay, they're like, did you see the kind of shoes he was wearing at trial, or his mama was sitting in the front row? She didn't seem to be upset when those pictures were shown. So they look at a lot of different things that don't come from the witness stand, or that maybe aren't exhibits that have been introduced at trial. So jurors don't check their common sense at the door. They're just no different from you and I. So they're looking around the courtroom, they're watching, they're looking at people's emotions, and I think that's something that weighs into their deliberation process, rightly or wrongfully. I mean, they're human beings, and they come into that courtroom with preconceived notions, just as you and I would, based upon our socialization, how we were raised, where we live, those kinds of things.
Darn it, I've never been on a jury. I would love to, but I've never even been called. Let's go to Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning. In most high-profile cases, the tendency is to ask for a change of venue. But the FOP is so strongly standing behind Delkey. What do you think the chances are that they will fight for that case to be heard here in Davidson County, since Memphis has had a community oversight board in many high-profile shootings, and the only other place would be Knoxville, who also had a community oversight board and followed some pretty high-profile cases. I just wondered if they would fight to keep that case here locally.
Great question.
That's a great question.
What do you think?
Great question. That depends on, you could ask 10 good lawyers that very question and get 10 very different answers in a lot of ways.
Well, we know there's been a ton of publicity on it, and a lot of times that's why people ask for a change of venue. They don't feel they can get a fair trial. This is different, though. There's been a lot of publicity. There's a lot of people that feel what happened to Mr. Hambrick was wrong. There's a lot of people that feel that Delkey was doing his job. So is a change of venue, I don't know, have the attorneys said? I don't know if we've heard from the attorney for Delkey.
I haven't seen any filing, I haven't heard any scuttlebutt about there being a filing for a change of venue, but Ann is right that it would be up to the trial judge to select a like community, and what would happen is, more likely than not, they would either go to Memphis or Knoxville to pick a jury, and then once they have that jury, they will bring them to Nashville to hear the case. But the important thing to remember, as she pointed out, is that when you go to Memphis, you get all of those folks. You're going to have their preconceived notions about maybe there's a big, maybe there's an anti-police sentiment that's huge in Memphis, or maybe there's a pro-police sentiment in Memphis or Knoxville. And so you're automatically, when you step into that area to pick out those jurors, you're going to take with them whatever's going on in their city.
That's right.
And so, I'm not so sure that they would be any better off in either one of those cities, but I can assure you that they have definitely looked at that. Mr. Delkey's got some great lawyers, and it's one of those decisions that when it's made, you hope that it pays off and it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah, my belief in this case, and I think everything you said there is right on point, is that it's going to stay here. I think the jury will be selected in Davidson County, and they'll go with it, because I don't think either side can say one way or the other that the sentiment out there is overwhelmingly against my client. I mean, for instance, if Andrew Cummins ends up going to trial in this case in Sumner County, they're going to have to go and get a jury elsewhere. That's a no-brainer. His attorney will ask for that. Because right now, everyone's like, this guy killed 8 people. You're not going to be able to find a juror in Sumner County who doesn't think he did it. All right, so they'll have to go. Different in the Delkey case.
There's nothing even really interesting in that case in the Westmoreland as to whether or not he's guilty or innocent. You know, I mean, I don't see any, right? I mean, you're just going to be going through the motions. We both know that.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
but in this case, we know for a fact that, you know, Officer Delkey shot Mr. Hambrick, okay, shot him in the back while he was running away. So we know that, you know, because the state is traveling under first-degree murder, so it's the intentional, premeditated killing of another. So we know premeditation can be formed in an instant. So we already know that the state, in this set of facts, you know, it qualifies. The question is this justified use of force?
Right.
And that's what they're going to be arguing. And they're going to be arguing about, you know, his training. He was doing what he said. And an interesting point, I talked to a retired police officer a couple of days ago in court, and he said that they need to be careful with the training issue, because that maybe that's not exactly how police officers were trained. Maybe it was more of a to conceal themselves, to not give chase. And that's the first I've heard of that. But he said that they've got to be careful with that training piece, because you know, obviously they're going to have retired police officers get up there and talk about the training,
what they were taught,
right? And then they're going to have someone from the training academy, the state will, that'll come in and obviously negate that and say, well, we don't really teach it like that or something like that. So it's going to be interesting to, you know, we're talking about a use of force here, not whether, you know, he killed, because we know he killed Mr. Hambrick. So it's a little bit different of a case. You know?
I agree. And that, by the way, that, folks, is one we will be covering gavel to gavel if it indeed happens. And that's not to say there couldn't be a plea deal, but that'll probably be sometime early next year.
I doubt that.
Yeah, you doubt that. All right, we'll take a break on that note. When we come back, more of your phone calls, more of our conversation with legal analyst Nick Leonardo on some of these high-profile cases here in the mid-state area. We'll be right back.
This is a Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download the Storm Shield app.